Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. So thanks for coming to my channel. Before I get into the main subject in this video, just want to quickly mention big events in the news this week. The first is the devastating floods in continental Europe, particularly Germany, but I understand Belgium, Austria, Italy have also been affected. I think this must be the worst in Europe since the 2002 floods, at least 160 dead, many others missing, and Germany's been particularly hard hit. Angela Merkel, coming back from her last trip to the United States, and Frank-Walter Steinmeier have visited the site. A lot of people have lost their homes, their property, and their lives. So it's a major disaster. And my heart goes out to all those caught up in this. Flooding can cause immense damage. We do get it in the south of the UK quite often, relatively often, particularly in low-lying areas. But I think it's one of those things people don't think it will happen to them, and then it does. This was a deluge, so there's going to be a whole debate around climate change and so on with that. But whether it will change state policy or not in terms of, yeah, it's going to be a debate. The other big thing, of course, is the unrest in South Africa. Serious violence in Johannesburg, Durban, other major cities. So this comes down to the jailing of Jacob Zuma on corruption charges, and the speculation that it's Zuma supporters instigated this in Durban. But to what extent that was the trigger of the violence, or whether it's just opportunism. Certainly, thinking of the England riots in 2011, a lot of the violence and looting in that was opportunism. Now, in the case of South Africa, you have very high crime rates generally, also a lot of poverty. That's no excuse for looting. Looting is a terrible thing, but Peter Hain, writing in the Times, made a good point. Peter Hain, the former Labour minister, who was born in South Africa and he's very close to the country. I think he was born in South Africa, could be wrong about that, but anyways, he's very close to the country and was a prominent anti-apartheid campaigner. He wrote that the international community needs to back Cyril Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa was a follower of Mandela, and with Jacob Zuma, he went from hero to zero. So that seems like a good assessment. The international community need to back Ramaphosa in trying to contain this situation. Hopefully, the worst is over now, but dozens dead, at least 72. It's even by South African standards, that's really bad. It's I think the worst violence actually since the apartheid era in South Africa, which is terrible. Um, so anyway, I just wanted to mention those two things because they're big in the news, and I don't know if I'll have time to talk about them individually. This video, I want to talk about something that's quite personal, not because I've been to the establishment I'm going to talk about, but because I've been a waiter. So I have some insight into this industry. A quick word on my own experience because I want to get to the point of this. I was a waiter on a few occasions. First time was at an Italian restaurant. Actually, the second time I'd done it at university. But I was at an Italian restaurant in Sunderland. It's long been out of business now, but basically, I remember one day the tips were taken away. I was 19 at the time, and I think I was being paid less than the national legal minimum wage at the time. We're talking about 2007 here. But one day the managers just, or the chef actually told me the tips have been taken away. The managers apparently explained that this is because tables hadn't been wiped properly. But this was very strange because in the UK, tips are not mandatory. If a customer gives a tip, it's because they're satisfied with the service, not because it's part of the charge. So that's kind of a contradiction in their logic. But even if there was an issue with tables, taking away waiters' tips is unethical. I mean, the correct way to deal with that would be to reprimand the staff and, explain that that's the problem and it needs to be done properly next time. But you can't take away tips, especially when the wages are meagre to begin with. The second occasion I worked at a Chinese buffet, and that was just a charade because I applied for the job. I was given the job, and this perhaps was partly my fault. I should have followed up more initially. But after a week, I spoke about the situation of wages, like how would I be paid? And like I say, I really should have clarified that in the beginning. But I think it was the restaurant's responsibility to just have a protocol for that. Anyway, I was told that I wouldn't be paid because it was a training week. Now, I wasn't happy about this because I wasn't, you know, that wasn't something that was mentioned at the start. As far as I was concerned, I was working. I was doing everything I was told to do. I was trying my best. I never claimed to be the world's best waiter, but I tried my best. Anyway, when I spoke to the manager on the phone, he was in London. He didn't know who I was. I had to tell him, "Oh, you hired me last week." So that, just a very dismissive attitude. And yeah, he claimed that it was a training week and I wouldn't be paid. I quit there and then because I refused to be treated like that. Basically exploitation. To me, okay, a training week might be an unpaid thing, but at least tell people up front. So that was my own experience. So frankly, I've got a bit of a bad perception of the hospitality industry. Now, maybe I was just unlucky, and I know that my bad experience doesn't represent the whole picture. There are decent managers, restaurateurs out there who don't treat their staff like birds. I get that. This case I've been reading about in the Times, and I've came across the same report in the Scotsman. I'll read out from the Scotsman because it's a bit more condensed, but it's essentially the same thing. In the Times, I should say it's from the 16th of July, and it refers to an establishment called Kitchin in Edinburgh. And the report is about one Tom Kitchin. That's no pun, that's actually the guy's name. And the report in the Times, the headline is Michelin star chef accused of humiliating and abusing staff. And that report's by Gabriella Bennett. But I'll read out the report from the Scotsman because it's essentially the same, it's just a bit more condensed. For the sake of, I don't want to lose this video, so sometimes when I make longer videos it gets lost. Tom Kitchen, Michelin star chef accused of physically abusing and humiliating staff. This is by Beth Murray. So I'm going to read this out and then share some of my thoughts on the philosophy around this, because frankly, it pisses me off. 13 former employees of the Kitchen Group. 13, right? Bear that in mind. We're not talking about one person. 13 former employees of the Kitchen Group have reportedly come forward and accused Michelin-starred chef Tom Kitchen of physically abusing and humiliating them at work. The Times reported on Friday the former staff members came forward after an earlier investigation reported allegations of mistreatment under the Kitchen Group between 2008 and 2019. The recent accusations include Kitchen grabbing employees and pinning them up against the wall and denying staff medical treatment after service until after service. One junior chef claimed the renowned cook threw him against a door in 2012 while he was working at the Kitchen, an Edinburgh-based Michelin-starred restaurant. An anonymous former employee, getting ads appearing here, so I'm just trying to scroll past those. An anonymous former employee claimed Kitchen grabbed his jacket and knocked him off his feet for failing to smooth over the surface of a tub of mascarpone. He said he was also pinned up against a wall and had no idea what was happening. Kitchen 44 runs Michelin-starred restaurant The Kitchen and gastropub Scran and Scally, both in Edinburgh, and has been a guest judge on BBC One's MasterChef. David Sunderland, 32, alleged that Kitchen kicked through and undermined him between 2011 and 2012 while he was working as a commis chef. He said that he was once serving a table of VIPs with very specific instructions, but that confusion led Kitchen to throw all the plates, grab him, and push him up against the door. He told the Times, I'd been shouted at before, but never physically grabbed and threw him. Mr. Sunderland also claimed that once he was poked in the kidneys when I wasn't moving fast enough, a single knuckle jab kind of thing. He is now a head chef in Glasgow and has worked in several fine dining restaurants since working under Kitchen. Another chef said that in 2009, Kitchen refused to let a colleague who had suffered a burn while working seek medical attention until after the dinner service had ended. I mean, these are disgraceful situations. Two 19-year-old men, Ethan Marshall and Connor Dugan, also shared their experiences of working under the Kitchen Group. Mr. Marshall said that in 2018 he completed a day-long unpaid trial shift at the kitchen, where he claimed he saw Michelin star chef pin another chef up against a wall by his throat because he had made a mistake. And in the Times report, Kitchen claimed that Mr. Marshall never worked for him. But if this was a one-day trial, then, it sounds a bit like my experience. It sounds like Kitchen just didn't bother to kind of make an account of the fact that he'd employed this guy, even if it was a trial basis. He was then allegedly moved to another of Kitchen's restaurants, this is Mr. Marshall, the Scran and Scally, where he claimed that colleagues refused to use his name, referring to him only as it, him, or the stage. A spokesman for the Kitchen Group had denied Mr. Marshall ever worked for the business. Well, that's what I've just referred to. That doesn't mean he never did. It just means that they probably didn't bother, or it could mean, I should say, that they didn't bother recording it. Kitchen earlier this month suspended two members of staff following allegations of unacceptable behaviour at his restaurants. In a statement, Kitchen said, I have a hard-earned and well-merited reputation for demanding very high standards and also for being firm but fair. I'm going to come back to that point because that was his initial response. That's why hundreds of ambitious chefs from all over the world have sought to work as part of our team in the past 15 years, honing their skills at one of the country's top restaurants. People understand that pressurized, often frenetic, and highly charged kitchen environments aren't for everyone, but we have already made clear that a fully independent external HR consultancy will investigate any genuine complaints and where they have merit will not hesitate to take appropriate action. Well, to me, that's a very dismissive response. I mean, in terms of what he had said. Okay, they're having an investigation, but his whole attitude is one of trying to downplay it, of saying that, oh, well, it's a pressurized environment. He's not actually denying the claims. He's not actually saying, no, I never assaulted the staff members. He's not saying that bullying is abhorrent or anything like that. He's basically using this technique that others have used to sort of say, well, it's just high pressure. They should stop whining, basically. It's very Gordon Ramsay-esque. Now, obviously, the report's not about Gordon Ramsay. It's about this guy, Tom Kitchen. But Tom Kitchen, just double check. Yeah, Tom Kitchen. Um, Here's the thing, right? They're allegations, okay? I know allegations are not facts, but with 13 people coming forward, I don't think there could be smoke without fire. And it really pisses me off, angers me, that someone like Tom Kitchen thinks that he can conflate high standards and pressure and expectations with basically bullying and degrading behaviour. I mean, physically assaulting someone. I don't care how good your food is. That is absolutely a red line. And, having been a waiter, really, the dynamic is not one. It's not one where a young waiter or a junior chef or a trainee chef really can easily complain. Because, if you have someone like this who is a successful chef, I'm talking commercially successful, um, he's renowned, he's Michelin starred, etc., then it's kind of, it's intimidating going up against that. But the only way that something like this gets exposed, if there are whistleblowers, that's why it's so important that these claims are not dismissed. He says an investigation is ongoing. Well, that would have to be a truly independent investigation. And when he says appropriate action will be taken, these allegations are not just about a culture of bullying, but the allegations are against him personally, that he has assaulted staff members. Now, if that's true, I hope he gets all the backlash that comes his way. I looked at the reviews, and the reviews are generally positive. But personally, I mean, I've never been a fan of fine dining anyway. I find it a bit stuffy, and I'm just not a fan of it. But I would not frequent a business. I don't care how good the food was. I don't care if it tasted like manna from heaven. If I knew that there was bullying going on in the background or exploitation, Other allegations against this guy is that tips were taken away. I think there's a real culture here of abuse going on, abuse of power, and I think it's disgusting. Bear in mind, we're not talking about one person making these allegations, which might be dismissed as someone who's just sour grapes because maybe they weren't a very efficient waiter or chef, and they were fired for that. I get that a kitchen environment is pressurizing. I've worked in it, it is a pressurizing environment. I get that, top chefs are under pressure. They have deadlines to meet. They have, clientele to serve, etc., etc. But I really get angry at the idea that the only way to be successful is by being obnoxious and abusing your power. The physically assaulting someone because they haven't done something the way you wanted it is crossing a red line. And saying that, oh, I'm successful, so that just proves that this is all, you know, put it this way, Harvey Weinstein was successful. He was a successful producer. I don't think there's many people now that rationally would say that there wasn't smoke without fire in his cases. I know it's a different dynamic, but just because someone's successful on the surface, and they might be successful in terms of being wealthy and powerful, it doesn't mean that there aren't things going on in the background. Personally, I think the hospitality industry is rife with this sort of thing. I mentioned Gordon Ramsay earlier, but I think his whole approach sets out a very negative message. It sends out the message that if you're hard-assed and obnoxious and you get in people's faces, that's the way to be successful. I mean, let's face it, Gordon Ramsay is not primarily famous for his dishes, for his recipes. He's not. He is primarily famous for his temper and for getting in people's faces. I mean, to me, I don't see the entertainment value of that. This isn't acting. These are real people. And I don't think it's good enough to say, oh well, they're being sloppy or they're stubborn in their approach that they're taking or whatever. The fact of the matter is, Ramsay gets in their face, and it's not constructive criticism. It's not like you need to do better or this is wrong. I'm experienced. Listen to me. It's basically things like, oh, well, you're a loser. When I was your age, I had done this, and he's always putting people down and just getting in their face. Quite honestly, I think Gordon Ramsay is an obnoxious shit. I can't stand the man. And it saddens me that so many people seem to admire him. For what? For what? Because he's wealthy? Because he has a lot of restaurants? Because his food's good? None of those things are enough for me to respect the guy. As far as I'm concerned, Gordon Ramsay normalizes bullying behavior. I don't like the guy. Never have. I've never got a good vibe from him. And I think that that sort of mentality, it sends out the wrong message. I really do. Um, like I say, something could be good on the surface. Now, I've obviously not been to this guy's restaurant. I wouldn't go anyway. But all I would say to people who've been there, maybe they had a really nice meal. Okay, maybe the food's good. Maybe the man knows how to cook. But ask yourselves, are you really comfortable knowing that this sort of thing might be going on in the background? I wouldn't be. Um, I do think that, like I say, this is a really big problem in the hospitality industry. Pressure is not an excuse. You get pressure in a lot of walks of life, in politics and sports. A true leader knows the difference between having high demands and expectations versus abusing power. There is a very clear difference. A leader would have their expectations, they would have their targets, their goals, and what they expect in their staff. Fine. I'm not questioning that. So they lay out those guidelines, well, not guidelines, they lay out those expectations. And they say, this is what I want. This is what you have to do. We're a busy restaurant, and if you want to work for me, that's what you need to do. But the second Kitchen put his hands on people, it's crossing a line. And as far as I'm concerned, 13 people. You either say one of two views. You either think yeah, there is definitely something going on here, or it's some big conspiracy, maybe by business rivals to make him look bad. I think that's a very flimsy theory based on the attitude he's come out with. Now, personally, if I was a business owner and someone accused me of bullying, if I felt it was untrue, I would be fiercely defending myself. I would be, and not in terms of, oh, I expect high business standards. I would say, no, this is totally false. That did not happen. Now, I think it's interesting that Kitchen hasn't actually denied it. Rather, he's trying to excuse it. To me, speaks volumes. I'm no snowflake. I get that in certain environments, there's a certain pressure. I mean, take the armed forces, for example. If you have a drill instructor, they're not going to tiptoe around. Obviously, that's going to be tough. From my very brief stint in the Navy, I experienced that, and I have no issues with that. The drill instructor, there's a different name in the Navy actually, but that's beside the point. He was quite tough, and I messed up a few maneuvers, and he yelled at me and he called me names. That's fine. I expected that in the armed forces, and I have no complaints about that. But he never physically struck me. He never, and when I say he called me names, like it was nothing that I could say got to me, and I expected it. But I think when you get to the point of physically assaulting someone, that is a red line. It really is. And I think that the industry as a whole needs to have better safeguarding in practice. I don't give a damn how good a restaurant is. It could be the best restaurant in the world. As far as I'm concerned, no food, is worth the price of that sort of suffering going on in the background. And it can cause profound suffering. If you're going to a work environment where you feel degraded, where you feel humiliated, it can be very, very unpleasant. Workplace bullying is a serious, serious problem. It leads to huge amounts of mental health problems, anxiety. It's a terrible thing. I've had a little bit of experience of it. Well, in my case, it was more, I would say, under the exploitation bracket than bullying. I can't say that in the Italian restaurant I worked in, I was bullied. The managers, it was actually quite subtle because on the surface they never shouted, they never raised their voices, but they were definitely, um, I think, quite corrupt in terms of how they were going about things. Um, and I just think that a true leader doesn't have to do that in any walk of life. Strict, yes. Discipline, yes. High targets, yes. All those things probably are necessary for a business to do well. I accept that. But I do not accept that being successful requires degrading people. Being successful requires getting in people's faces. Being successful requires physical assault. And as for the allegation that an employee was burned and Kitchen refused to allow them to get medical treatment, I mean, that is absolutely disgraceful. I hope that person sues him. If they have permanent scalding or something, I hope they sue the hell out of him. Because this guy really deserves a backlash if these allegations are true. And my gut feeling is they are true, based on the attitude he's come out with. So if you're in Edinburgh, and you agree with me, I urge you to avoid this business. Don't give your money to this guy. I don't think. I mean, he's already successful, but I do think he deserves a backlash. Let me know your thoughts. Also, one last thing: if you are thinking about getting into the hospitality industry, I'm not saying that every restaurant is like this, but just be aware that it is quite difficult if you feel that you're being unfairly treated. You probably could go to an employment tribunal. I didn't because I didn't know how to go about that. The other issue of going to an employment tribunal, let's say, for example, well, I suppose that would be more the realm of unfair dismissal. But let's say you're a whistleblower and you want to talk about bullying or something. Well, then, if you're working for the very person who was bullying you, or at least who was fostering that atmosphere, then there's going to be resentment. So I think it's a difficult thing. But I will close on one point. This independent investigation is only come about because of these allegations. This has been going on for years, according to the reports. So Kitchen will have known about this. And as far as I'm concerned, even if some of those allegations are not true, the culture starts at the top. He's the boss. He's the manager of these restaurants, the owner. So I think that if there is something going on in these establishments, he will know about it. That's a no-brainer. But what's particularly important in this case is a lot of the allegations are aimed at him personally. My gut feeling is he's a POS, to be quite honest. And I think he's kind of a wannabe Gordon Ramsay. I wouldn't be at all surprised. There's actually a picture of him and Gordon Ramsay together. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he's been inspired by Ramsay's technique. Like I say, I know Ramsay's famous, he's successful, he's a millionaire. But from what, you know, I think it's possible that the hospitality industry will have a sort of crisis period, like a bit like Hollywood had the whole Me Too thing, and you've had other areas where there's been you know one scandal after another, and it's sort of blowing up. Um, I think that might happen with hospitality, and I hope it does, because I think that this problem is actually very widespread. People go for a nice meal, they don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Now, another point, and I will round up with this, is that to any restaurateurs out there who are decent and who treat their staff fairly, I think you should speak out, because this damages the industry as a whole. It casts a negative perception of how this industry works. So if you know that you're treating your staff well, you should condemn this guy, or at least condemn the allegations. The nature of the allegations. Bullying is a horrible thing. There's no excuse for it. And I think that a reasonable, decent person will know the difference between high demand and blatant bullying. Now, if you're using your position of authority to undermine people, to, shove people against doors, refuse to allow injured people to get treated, that is pure abuse of power. Um, and this guy, Tom Kitchen, his whole attitude stinks. It's pretty much, oh, well, we have high standards and look at my success. That's not a way to address this. The way to address it is to either deny the allegations if he believes he's innocent, or to say that we take this very seriously and we do not promote a culture of bullying. Balls in his hands, or in his park. But quite honestly, it disgusts me to the core. Because, like I say, for a young waiter or chef, it's very, very difficult. I mean, they could just quit, but if they're ambitious, and this is the problem. Someone like that, maybe that is a way to further their catering career. And what if it's the only way? It's a bit like the casting couch in Hollywood. What if a young actress, the only way to get forward is by, having to deal with the likes of Harvey Weinstein? Well, in the catering industry, maybe the only way to get forward is to have to deal with the likes of Tom Kitchen and Gordon Ramsay. And that's really a very sad situation. It shouldn't have to be that way. So, yeah, I'll just close by saying something needs to be done. I think that if these allegations, add up, I think Tom Kitchen will need to prove that there's a different culture there. But to be honest, I hope he does face a backlash. If this just kind of was swept under the carpet, it would be a disgrace. I personally hope he faces a backlash, because I do think there's no smoke without fire. And even, if he's totally innocent, well, I don't think he is. I really don't think he is. A backlash would force him to act and change his ways, change his attitude as well. To me, success is not, how do you sleep with yourself at night if you've got successful by being a shit and by treating people like dirt?